IME 50th celebration. Welcome to this panel on community college leadership and praxis. My name is Professor Melissa Canlas. I'm associate professor here in IME. I'm an alumnus of IME, grateful to have been in the program, especially with taking classes with two of our panelists here today. I also run I'm the project director of our AAPI Center, Asian American Pacific Islanders Center. And prior to coming to USF, I taught at the community college level in ethnic studies departments for over a decade. So I'm very happy to get to facilitate this panel. In many ways, community college is my first academic and teaching love. And so I'm always really happy to rep community colleges and the services that they offer to our students and our communities. So this is our flow for today. We're going to get to hear from four folks, all alumni of IME, and we'll hear them in this order: Dr. Rowena Tamaneng, Dr. Manuel Alejandro Pérez, Dr. Kassie Alexander, and Dr. Michelle Simotas. And I want to just offer a couple of opening remarks and some framing, which is to start with this question, which I'm very fond of asking. My students hear me ask this all the time. And this is Grace Lee Boggs, who asks us, what time is it on the clock of the world? And I think there are so many ways to answer that question right now, right? I think it's no secret that we are living in dangerous times, right? Dangerous, precarious times. And it is also a time of incredible movement building. And we're seeing that here locally, throughout the Bay Area, nationally, in small and large ways. We're seeing that internationally in places like Italy and Bangladesh and Nepal and the Philippines, where we're seeing these bigger uprisings happening as well. And one of the things that Grace reminds us is that this is also a time to grow our souls. It's a time when so many institutions in our society need reinventing. It's time for us to create a new dream. And that is how we understand what it is to be a revolutionary. And so in these really hard and dangerous times, it is with such gratitude that we get to gather today. Those of you who are here for the opening ceremony, I was just telling someone, I'm like, I think that's the most I've felt my feelings in a long time, right? To be able to be with art and music and percussion and community is some of, I think, the medicine that I need. And maybe it's what you all need too. And so we're gathering in that spirit today of dreaming together and building together in hard times and finding the joy that is possible when we do get to be together. And because it's our IME 50th, and because I want to shout out the ideological ancestors to IME before we get into this, I wanted to give a shout out to our lovely Bell Hooks, whose work really does inspire so much of what we do here. And of the many things she says, she also had written that there must exist a paradigm, a practical model for social change that includes an understanding of ways to transform consciousness that are linked to efforts to transform structures. And I think part of what we're going to hear today are folks on the state level all the way down to classroom levels about ways that folks on the community colleges are doing liberatory educational work that does both, right? Transforming consciousness and working to transform structures. So with that, I'm going to invite our first panelist, Dr. Rowena Tamaneng, to come up. What we'll do is we'll hear from all of the panelists in succession, and then afterwards we'll bring everybody up for a little Q&A and discussion. Sound okay? All right, thank you all for being here. Could you help me welcome Dr. Tamaneng?
Thank you, Melissa, and it's really great to be here today with the IME community and with this celebration of 50 years. You could see there that I am an alumni. I finished my doctorate and graduated in 2017. And when I talk about the experience that I've had in IME, it's always with love and inspiration. And I had already been in the California community colleges for many, many years when I came back to get my doctorate. And I started as a community college student myself, grew up in Southern California. So being in the California Community College system and serving across 3 different colleges very actively I don't perceive it as work. I really perceive it as love, and this is my way of giving back to a system that has really lifted me up and really helped me in terms of my trajectory and even the decision-making to become an educational practitioner in the California community colleges. So I just love IME. When I came back to school, I said to everybody, this is the type of program that all graduate programs should be. Because when I experienced my first doctoral program in the UC system, I talk about that all the time, that it was not a place of belonging. I had to create my own, community there. It was very white dominant in terms of the expectations for graduate students in relation to your writing, in relation to your performance. And so when I went through that program, I left before my PhD because I had some discriminatory behaviors directed toward me by my white male professors in terms of my dissertation areas. So when I came to IME, I just said, this is really what all education should be about. And it's a model that I try to propagate wherever I'm at when I'm giving advice. So I was asked to share a little bit about what we're up to in terms of the California Community Colleges system. And so I do have a few slides, and I really welcome questions at the end and that interaction if you want additional information. So I was going to talk a little bit about my leadership team that I'm very happy about because I've only been in the Chancellor's office permanently since July of this year, but I had been serving in the role since fall of 2024, on loan from my previous position. And then I was going to talk a little bit about just California community colleges in general, and then our bold Vision 2030 goals, which we just updated this year. So to give you a sense of the California community colleges, we are the largest higher ed system in the United States. We're serve 2.1 and growing million students across 116 colleges, which also includes one fully online college. And then we have 73 locally governed districts. And then in terms of our demographics, we have about 48% of our student body who identify as Latine. So happy Latinx Heritage Month. We have 23% of our student body identifying as white or European American, 11% Asian American, 5.6% African American or Black, 4.9% multi-ethnic, 2% Filipino, happy Filipino History Month, 1% American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Pacific Islander. In terms of gender, this is sort of true in terms of what's happened in terms of the gender makeup in higher education across the country. We have about 53% identified as female, 44% male, 1.2% non-binary, and 2% have not disclosed. For our age, in terms of who we serve, 58% of our students are 24 or younger, and 42% are adult learners, which we identify as 25 or plus. And then in terms of income level, 62% are classified as economically disadvantaged. So on the map, you can't quite see because it's supposed to be yellow. There's supposed to be yellow dots on here, but I wanted to give you a sense of geographically where our 116 colleges are across California. So I just came back from a far north tour. So I was up in the mountains with some of our colleges from Shasta to close to Lake Tahoe area to down below. And then we're as far down as Southwestern College, which is very close to the Mexico border. And then what you don't quite see in terms of the mapping is we have a cluster of colleges that are in the Inland Empire, and then also in that far north. So I wanted to highlight those communities because the research has shown us that they are in university deserts. So we have place-bound students that the access to a UC or a CSU or even a private institution like USF, they are 60 to 75 miles or more away. And so as a system, we've begun to prioritize those communities that lack resources and really lack access to higher education beyond our community colleges. So if students want to transfer, they have to relocate, or if they can't afford to relocate, they have to drive these really long distances to get to their four-year institution if online opportunities are not available. So I wanted to also highlight that in terms of leadership, and this is something that, I learned also from IME, that if we're going to be serving across all of our different communities and recognizing and valuing their cultures of our diversity, it really is important to have a diverse leadership. At the system level, I believed it at the college level as a campus president, so I focused a lot on hiring, the DEI hiring, which is now frowned upon by the federal government. But in my team, when I joined the chancellor's office, I had vacancies. So in the last couple of months, I've been very, very active in terms of filling out my team. And so you can see from my executive vice chancellor for research to program operations to academic affairs to student affairs to workforce economic development and then also innovation and equity. I've tried to really do some diverse hires for both gender and then also for ethnicity. And my team is dynamite, and we all have, I would say, an IME, liberatory educational perspective and lens in our practice before they were in the chancellor's office and they were at their individual districts. And now certainly I feel like I have a very powerful team. So Vision 2030, a roadmap for California community colleges. This is our system-wide priorities for the system. Under our Chancellor Sonia Christian, and our Board of Governors, Vision 2030 is our strategic planning work that we're doing and our system priorities from 2022 to 2030. So what we're doing with Vision 2030 is we're trying to meet California learners where they are. So we've got working learners across the state. We have first-gen students that are rising. We have continue to serve underserved populations, the 2.1 million, and then a recent study by one of our research partners, California Competes, showed that we have 6.8 million adult Californians with no credential. And these Californians are coming from diverse communities, from recent immigrant populations to folks that have been here for many, many generations. So our Vision 2030 goals, it's a living document, it's iterative, we're always assessing it. And so at the heart of Vision 2030 is bringing college to students, not waiting for students to come to us. And then we have made a recommitment to the 3 goals that were established in 2023, which is increasing equity in access to higher ed, increasing equity into student success, and increasing equity in support. And we're focused on measurable outcomes for our communities. Our research team has set ambitious metrics for the field. And then we have 3 strategic directions and 12 actions that accompany those. So the 3 strategic directions are, the first one is equitable baccalaureate attainment, and there are 6 specific actions that we've challenged the system to take on. So this is about students transferring to achieve a baccalaureate. This is about reducing time to complete the baccalaureate. This is about dual enrollment and working with our high school partners so that students can get an early start, and then college is more affordable. If you have dual enrollment, 12 units under your belt before you attend college, then that's 12 units that you're not paying for. And then we also have a focus on equitable workforce and economic development. We are privileged that we get to work closely with the state. We are a state agency, so we actually were one of the lead agencies in working with Governor Newsom and his team to develop the new California Career Master Plan. And so for what we're doing in this area, we're scaling up credit for prior learning, where if you have already experience in different professions and you don't have a degree, associate degree, or you don't have college credit, we want to give you college credit and recognize the skills that you've already accomplished, and our faculty are on board working with us to make that happen. How many of you have heard of competency-based education, CBE? So that is another strategy that we are working on. And CBE, again, it's like CPL. It's recognizing the skill sets that you already have, the knowledge and experience, so that you can obtain that certificate or degree, faster, and it's more affordable. Then finally, the future of learning. This is about AI and the future of learning. So it's not just about simply embracing AI, working with all of our tech companies, but it's also offering a critique and thinking through what are the impacts of AI on our employees? What are the impacts of AI on our communities? And I'm going to go faster. And so for this one, I'm not going to read everything here, but I just wanted to emphasize again the rural and place-bound community focus, honoring learning wherever it occurs. And then one other important aspect is climate action and really thinking about the green economy and sustainability. And part of the climate action work that we're doing on the curricular side is also really thinking through environmental justice in relation to our communities. And then lastly, for my last slide, we're not doing this in a silo at the system level. We have identified 4 spheres of engagement as our strategy. So we engage the field and our community colleges. So just to give you an example, we have over 90 community colleges that are involved in all of our activities, including our demonstration projects that support those strategic directions and goals. And then we're also trying to break down system level barriers. So IME, liberatory education, it's really critical that we think of the systemic and what the systemic barriers are. So we are also doing that from a Vision 2030 perspective. And where we need to change policy, we are engaging at the policy level and working with our elected officials across the state to have policies that will increase access across our student body, support, whether money coming with funding coming with it, and then also increasing student success. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop. My time is up, and I look forward to the Q&A later. Thank you.
right, buenos dias, everyone. Good morning. Let me do some quick adjusting here for we have folks online. I see you folks. Well, I don't, but in my heart I do, so. All right, just checking volume real quick. That's good for everyone in the room, yes? Okay. All right, buenos dias. My name is Manuel Alejandro Pérez. I use he, him, el pronouns. Es un gusto estar aquí con todos ustedes. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. So I really appreciate following my colega, Dr. Tomaning. I'm gonna chat with us a little bit deeper and different as it relates to California community colleges, specifically my role as a presidente at the College of San Mateo. And explicitly, I want to talk a little bit about the role that representation plays in our systems. Now, don't get me wrong, representation is important in all of our systems, not just at the California community colleges, but what I'm here to say is that because of the open access nature of our entire system, where anyone can take classes with us, anyone and everyone is invited to take classes with us, it is a moral obligation, in my opinion, that we come with our fullest selves to work. Now, I know that comes with a lot of privilege to say you should bring your whole self to work. And there are many spaces that won't support that, but what I'm gonna talk about is my role in trying to shift that and how I do that in the ways that I work with folks on our campus. So what you're seeing on the screen is what I would like to respond to when asked about the role that liberatory education has in our system, specifically in the community colleges. But what you're seeing on the screen is the image of a tehuana. A tehuana, which is one of our most traditional representations of Zapotec mujeres or women from the Istmo de Oaxaca, in the Isthmus region of the state of Oaxaca in Mexico. This is specifically from an article that Remezcla did, an online magazine, on a documentary in 2020 about this community of Tehuanas. Now, what you're seeing next is a screenshot from my social media from one of my students a few years ago who graduated from USF. This is the course that I had the very unique honor and privilege to build and launch here at USF for the first time ever, which is Folklorico Danza and Culture. And so what you're seeing on the left is the small print in the far right that you can't read probably, but I'll read it out loud. We know we're a fan of directly reading from slides, but here we go. Hola, profe. Over the course, we discussed different traditional clothing from different states in Mexico. My family is from Oaxaca, and for graduation, I chose to wear a tehuana, which I bought with my aunt when visiting over the summer. We bought it in El Mercado de Juchitán, which is less than 2 hours from where my family lives. I just wanted to share and thank you for such an amazing course. Now, the moral of this message is that I teach an amazing course. No, I'm just kidding. The moral of this story is that students should always feel that they can find new ways to express their own stories, their own lived realities, their family's connections in ways that feel authentic, in ways that feel uniquely their own, and in ways that bring together both their contemporary realities and accomplishments and completion goals with who they are intrinsically at their core, or maybe for the first time in this self-discovery, as was the case with my student here at USF, where she learned more about her own Oaxacan herencia and familia. That, to me, is what liberatory education is about. It's about making spaces in which all of our students can find themselves uniquely represented in every space that they are at in our institutions. I know that's not always the case, but we, and I, in this case, I am gonna say, it is our moral obligation to constantly strive to create those spaces. And so, with that, I'm gonna talk to you about three things specifically in my role that I try to bring to the table. And all of these slides Every single one of them in some way, shape, or form has been shared either with my college directly or at the state level for statewide seminars for the California Community College system. Nothing that you're seeing today has not already been shown in some way, shape, or form to our institutions. And I share that very proudly because what we say sometimes in these research spaces feels like it can be protected because it's within this inquiry and investigative kind of ecosystem, but we need to bring that to a practical realm, which is what USF's IME program really helped to hit home, is that how do you bring the theoretical into the practical realm? And so I'm gonna argue that through coraje, cariño, and coalition are three ways in which our community college leadership does that. But specifically, if you have not heard of the word coraje, it is not directly translatable into English. But what recent scholars posit is that coraje is about heart raging. It's about caring so much about something that I am mad and I stay mad about a situation, but I love so deeply and so much that I'm here to engage in what this means for us, not just for me. I care enough to be raging about this. And what I often speak to our communities about is that we have to stay mad. We're talking about, and the framing is about, education in our community colleges today. And in that context, then, if we talk about coraje, meaning courage, bravery, or anger and rage, and how that mixes together with the corazón, with your heart, right? What role do we have? What responsibility do we have? And in my case, as a president of an institution, to say, I am mad. And the secret is that I'm kind of always mad. And does that mean some folks, this is what I have to wrestle with, which I talk to my partner about regularly, is that authenticity and representation, for me, is about being honest and transparent with our communities. Because the more that we start to detach and separate ourselves from communities, that distancing becomes much deeper than just bureaucracy and positionality. What I strive to do is find ways in which presidentes reflect the needs of community. And I do that by showing up authentically as often and in as many spaces as I can. And so what I talked to our middle college students about, now middle college are students that are in high school juniors and seniors that are taking half the day on the college campus in high school courses and half the day college courses, but they're all day long on the college campus. They are our students, we share them. I spoke with them about how we have to always stay mad and stay smart. We are all very smart. Our communities are very, very smart. And USF is the first place in space to teach communities around how to use their embodied knowledge and experiences as deeply rooted knowledge as practice. I also talk about the importance of care and cariño, love for yourself. The more that we love ourselves and the love for us, that's life. That is life-giving, that is life-sustaining. The more that we are kind and caring for one another, for ourselves, and practice that as a model and as a framework, the more that we get to deeper understandings of empathy, deeper understandings of connectedness, and arguably that third point, coalition building, relationship building. But what specifically I do on our campus is I talk very unapologetically about who I am and what motivates me, who I fight for. I talk about my husband. I want our folks to know, yeah, you have a queer identified presidente. You have a first-gen migrant seasonal farm working presidente who comes from an experience where I know what it feels like to have someone in your family who's undocumented and what it means to have to move through all of those different levels of power and positionality in society. I need for our communities to know unapologetically those components of my experience, because the presidency, and I did not coin this, but I've taken this from a colega of mine, the presidency is not mine. The presidency belongs to the community. The community owns the presidency. And when you reframe that positionality and that power, in what ways are you reflecting what the community needs and wants? What I get as feedback from our community is to keep doing this. And so I don't pretend that it's easy to do this all the time. In fact, I'm going to tell you that it's actually very hard, because there's a lot of I'm going to say intentioned, because sometimes it's well, sometimes it's not. Folks that will offer unsolicited advice around, oh, you know what, Manuel? Share less, share more, share deeper, share high level. Don't do that, don't do this, don't post here. Post here. And to be quite honest, it could be very, very, very isolating at times, right? As I was talking to somebody before starting the session, there are not very many queer identified Latine first-gen presidentes in the entire system. I don't think I'm special. I do think I'm a unicorn, but that's not because I'm special. But in what ways do we continue to make this not so unique? That's what I hope to do. I hope to make this not so special. I share often about how folklorico changed my life, traditional Mexican folklorico, and that was part of my research here at USF. That was part of my teaching of the course here at USF. I talk openly about where my family is from the state of Colima, along the coast, the Pacific coast of Mexico, and from the fields de agave in the state of Jalisco in Mexico. And I talk to our communities around what that means. How I was brought up understanding cycles of life and death through harvesting crops in Sacramento, in Yolo County, in Stockton, in Colusa County, in Grimes. And what it means to follow el durazno, or follow el jitomate, or follow the lettuce. And you follow those seasons and understanding the relationship of ebbs and flows, connectedness, and how that all is a part in the cycle of what we play in our system. I also talk about rest. And this is something that in this role, quite honestly, as I was talking to someone else as we were walking in today, we take for granted. Because there's like some hidden curriculum behind the curtain thing or expectation that at this level, because you have so much responsibility, it's rest for everyone else, but not for you, right? Like, no, if I am part of what is the community's presidency, and if I am truly representing and connecting with my community, what good am I if I burn out? What good am I if I work through 102-degree fever and I have to be in this meeting, I can't miss it? Also, what message do I give to my folks? You too should do the same, right? What message do I give to folks when I'm emailing on the weekends? And I do challenge my colegas who say, well, it's an emergency, I only email for emergencies. Homie, your emergency is not my urgency, you know? And y lo digo con todo respeto, with the fullest respect. Yes, of course, there are true emergencies, but in my opinion, those are life-threatening or someone's livelihood is on the line. So unless someone ain't getting paid because you didn't send an email or someone's life is on the line, it can wait. I promise it'll be fine. We set these rules. We do. We set these arbitrary rules. And I know that, you know, a president shouldn't be saying that rules are arbitrary because they maintain order and system and structure. But I think we need to be introducing notions like that so we can understand the why we do things. Yes, we need these opportunities, but we also need to understand that we're human beings through all of this. I talk with folks about be hella cute or be hella queer trans. In this case, I was talking about our coalition building with our queer trans community, our LGBTQ plus community. And I also talk to folks about the importance of the relationships that we have with communities in solidarity and how coalition is hella resistance and it is critical to our tomorrows, to our mañanas. So these are all images, I'm not going to go through each one, but that I have shared with our system around how we need to engage in advocacy work. I'm not here to tell you what to think, but I am here to tell you it needs to be critically conscious. You need to think something, and you can do it and protest in ways, you can share messages in ways that are different, that are unique to your experience, to your comfort level, to your confidence. But the important thing to keep in mind is that whether you're doing it directly, morally, out of ethical obligation, you have to know that there is no right way to do it, but you do have to have a way to do it. These are all the ways in which I think that in these roles and in the community college, we have this obligation to our communities because we literally serve everyone. From a student taking half a unit to students who are coming back from their graduate school experiences to take continuing education or to get their second degree. We have everything at our institutions, and I love that about us. And I'm happy to take questions when we get to that at the end. Thanks.
They gave me some tough shoes to follow. Dang, Manuel, goodness, all right. Well, good morning, everyone. So I'm Dr. Kassie Alexander, and I'm claiming the LCSW. Like, I'm like a month away from taking my test. I put it on there just to put the energy out there for myself. All right, so to just kind of say how I got here, and I say it's because of my ancestors. So I know we've all heard it, but I know that I am my ancestors' wildest dream. So just to stand here to say that I have finished my doctorate is just meaningful to me. You know, I know it's meaningful to my family as a first generation, everything. So just stand proudly in these shoes. So as I think about liberation and liberatory education in general, I do think about where I stand, just not as a Black woman, but as a person who was a Black student, right? So as I'm here today, I'm talking about how I work with Black students, but really just thinking about what I needed as a Black student myself to be successful. As I thought about my journey, I thought about the people I was going to be here with today, and I was telling my husband, I was like, it was really interesting when I got the email to be here today because of the people who I was going to be sitting here with, which was Rowena and Manuel, which represent my start and my current. So Rowena, it represents the woman who gave me my first full-time position. And Manuel represents the person who gave me my most recent position. So little fun facts, and you'll see my journey in just a moment, but so I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but you know, we're here today. But when I think about how we center ourselves in our experience and transforming education, it's our voices, it's humanizing student voices and the things that they have to offer. So when we look at that in the institutional setting, it's transforming the institution, not just the individuals, right? Because we spend a lot of time talking about what students need to do better, but what do the institutions need to do better in order to serve our students? So a little bit about myself and my journey. Started so my very first job was at Chabot College. And I'm going to speak to what Umoja is in just a second. So as a Umoja Council Coordinator, spent a little time at the College of Alameda. Then De Anza was my first full-time job. I did Skyline as a middle college counselor. Laney's kind of gone up and down in there. And then Cañada College, again, is my most current position. And then we're going to get to the fun stuff. So as a Black woman educator, I think about what are the things that really truly serve students. So lived experiences. So Manuel, you really tapped into this in terms of like who we are and what we have to sit with. So when I think about the word resistance and what that means, like it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So resistance can mean good things, it can mean bad things. But when I think about how we resist in order to create change, I think that's a lot of what I do and what I've done over the course of my years of working in education. So these kind of just speak to where I'm at today. So over the last year, I did a trip to Ghana. We went to, and we meaning my students at Cañada, we went to NCORE, so the National Conference of Race and Ethnicity this past year. It was in New York, and we held two different presentations. This presentation that's shown here was on Black women mixtape. So we were talking about really where do we find our voices and how do we center it around music. So thinking about how we find ourselves, the personal experiences of ourselves, centering the voices and the histories. And through my journey of doing my dissertation here, I focused on the Black women being unseen and unheard. So in that space, I really just thought about, as a woman who's worked in education a long time, I've often found myself in spaces where I don't feel seen, where I don't feel heard. So if I don't feel that as a something-year-old woman, how do I think my students are feeling through their transition? So as they're finding their voices, and I'm seeing them in my office saying, this teacher didn't listen to me when I told them that I couldn't turn my assignment in because I had X, Y, and Z going on. Or when they were telling me about their experiences in high school where they just felt different and they didn't know what that different meant, and they didn't know if it had to do with the color of their skin. They didn't know if it had to do with the identities that they sat with, but just giving them a space to feel heard. I felt like who I was, just being there, being a representation of them, allowed for them to have a different opportunity for themselves. And I actually should have put a picture of my office on here, because I think about representation as well. So I think in this space, I represent more of like the groundwork in just the more classroom, more holistic setting of what I do on a daily basis. So through questions and answers, I probably can answer it a little bit more specifically, but over the years, I have done a lot of work when it comes to supporting our Black students. So I would say the first thing I've done is become a counselor. So when I think about the why and how I got here, and I think we always center ourselves around the why, it's this woman sitting right here, number one, so Dr. Jeannie Wilson. So the fun fact is, and I just talked to her the other day, is I reminded her my oldest son is almost 19 years old, and she says, well, that means I've known you for almost 20 years. So she was my first counselor when I got out of high school. So she was my community college counselor at Chabot College. So she gave me my first opportunity walking through the quad of Chabot, where I probably should have been in class. I probably should have been doing something different. But she pulled me aside and she told me where I needed to be. And what was different about that is nobody else had seen me up until that time. So while no one was paying attention to me, here came this Black educated woman who spent just a little bit of time to tell me where I needed to be in a certain space. And then there was this program called Umoja that had existed. So if people aren't familiar with Umoja started at Chabot College back in 1988, and it has been around ever since. So it is now a statewide programming system, but it came from Chabot. So don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And Dr. Wilson and the English teacher, Tom DeWitt is still there. He is still the English teacher. He has been an English teacher since the 80s, but he is still teaching classes. But they were the two that trusted me in my journey as a student. And I'm focusing on myself because, again, in order to support the students, again, I had to get the support as well. So Dr. Wilson, again, I can tell you from when she started, I stopped. So I started at 18. Life started lifing with me. And then my second part of my journey is I became the non-traditional student. So I started at 18. Again, I started with saying I was the first generation student. Went through a lot. So went through bouts of abuse, trauma, other stuff. And then I didn't return to school until later in my 20s. And Dr. Wilson was still there. So I remember her calling me up one day and said, Kassie, what you doing? And I told her I was going through stuff, and she just kind of told me to come in and see her. And I did, and essentially we got things going. But a part of that journey meant me learning things about Cal work. So learning how to be a student on the system, which honestly, I grew up in a family where being on welfare was a bad thing. So nobody wanted to receive the services because that meant that you somehow were less than. So I remember when I told my mom that I was going to go on government assistance, she was like, Kassie, can't you just work? She said, maybe school isn't the time right now. Just focus on working, providing for your kids, and maybe later the time will come. And I was like, no, Mom, like my counselor, my social worker told me that they can give me these things and it'll happen. And she didn't trust it, so I had to trust myself. So long story short, I got CalWorks, WIC, everything else, and that was my journey into getting into education, because I would truly say without Dr. Wilson, I wouldn't have known about the things that existed, and I definitely know that I wouldn't be here. And then without Umoja, I wouldn't have had a space to feel confident. I wouldn't have had a space to feel like I didn't belong in that space, and that's what Umoja has done for the students. And this is my first cohort of, I would say, a self-built, not self, but a built Umoja program for a program I was entrusted with actually at De Anza. So that was my first year at De Anza, and this was my first class. And I used this picture to think about the students who were represented in this class, because I had over 40 students in my class the very first year that I was there. And of the 40 students, it was only 3 who said that they had ever sat in a class with more than one Black student. So only 3 students of this picture had sat in a classroom with other people that had looked like this prior to this day. So that speaks volumes in terms of what it means to do outreach, recruitment, to be intentional. And these students stayed together. They were a cohort. I still have pictures with them. Like, we have traveled together. We have done things together, but it was being intentional, and it was preparing them. And then this is my, one of my most recent pictures, number 3, is preparing them for transfer and long-term success. So again, when I can share my experiences and when I can tell them not only who I am, but what they can do, to see me lets them know what they can do as well, what they can accomplish. So this student on the end is Pérez. So Pérez recently graduated. She's at UC Berkeley right now. She's pursuing law. But she was one of my first cohort at Cañada College. And I just remember her telling me, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. But with support towards the end, I remember talking to her mom, and it definitely wasn't a me. This is all about community. This is about connecting our students to services, knowing what the services are. I definitely 100% believe in what Umoja has to offer. So connecting students to services like our Umoja programs, again, being unapologetic about saying we need something for ourselves. I think sometimes we get lost in saying we need to be in spaces for everybody. Yes, we do need to have rooms like this that exist, but we definitely need rooms where I could be in a space where there's just be with just women. I could say, you know what, my stomach hurts today. Let's talk about what cramps look like. Or once I go through that menopause, what does that look like? You know, I need to be able to be in spaces where I can be comfortable, or I need to be in a space where I just feel sad about what's happening in my community, and I don't want to be judged by who's looking at me in the room that might not identify with me. Doesn't mean that I don't want to hear what you have to say. It just means right now, maybe this isn't the moment. And then just looking ahead, like, how do we just continue to do this work? And again, I just really believe in considering safe spaces, spaces of belonging for students. So safety is everything to me. And I'm big on saying students are going to go where they feel seen, heard, and where they feel welcome. And a lot of times students will say things to appease others, but then when they close the door with people that they feel most comfortable with, they will tell you the truth. And they will say, yes, this person over here who may not look like me is a great person, but I really just needed to be in this space because I just saw that so-and-so got shot. And I don't know what that means for our community right now. Or something happened at home and this is like more of a cultural dynamic, and I really want to understand more about culture and dynamics. And a lot of times, especially since I've been working with in the South Bay, I have a large population of Afro-Latino students who don't have a deep connection to their Black side, unfortunately. So usually as a counselor, I'm like the first true experience with Blackness that they have. In that original De Anza photo, that was what a lot of that represented with our students. So understanding and giving them the connection to their culture and community. And understanding strength and equity-driven leadership and policy change. Excuse me, I got lost with that. Strengthening equity-driven leadership and policy change. I really just want to say we are more than just a document and an agenda item. It is so easy to put us down and say, we need to work more with Black students. Black men are struggling. Yes, that is a thing, but what are we going to do about it? what are we going to do to truly listen and be intentional about the services that we're providing our students beyond the paperwork? Because to get into a room and to really listen to them, I was actually just a part of a conference a few weeks ago where actually it was probably one of the better conferences I went to, where it was talking about how Black students are about 40% more likely when served by a Black counselor to be successful. Not a counselor, a Black counselor. And then talking about how Black students, we know that they do better within their first year if they can get through math and English. That is a great fact. But what does it also mean to put them around services and people who are going to intentionally serve them and understand them unapologetically? Again, we put programs and policies in place, but we don't often follow through with the full means of the systems that are needed to support our students. And then we don't quite understand because the people in which sometimes do the work don't have an understanding of how to serve either. So again, how do we get us to be more than just checking off a box and saying, I did the thing to serve the student? Yes, we did. We have this service, so now we have this service, we're good. Or how do we become more than saying, yes, we were able to get students 100 meals this semester. Great, but I promise you they went home hungry still. So like, how do we get them to the services where we can say we got them part-time jobs or we got them connected to resources outside of here so that they can sustain life themselves? And this is, to me, all a part of our ongoing commitment to liberatory education and practice.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. My name is Michelle Simotis. I am not a doctor yet, so I appreciated being introduced that way. It's going to take a long time to feel comfortable with that title. So I'm actually defending my dissertation proposal next week. Yeah, so I'm still a current student. And I wanted to share a little bit about my experience leading in community colleges, because I've worked in community colleges for about 18 years, starting as staff and then adjunct faculty, full-time tenured faculty, and now currently serving as a dean. And part of why I wanted to share that is I would love to see more people in this program working in community colleges. So I wanted to just get a show of hands of how many current students do we have in the room? Awesome. How many alumni do we have in the room? Very cool. And how many just community members here to support? Great, beautiful. How many of those in the room are interested in working in community colleges? Yay, awesome. We need you. Okay, so we were asked to kind of share a little bit about how our ethos of liberatory education kind of drives us in our work. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the way I think about this in my work in community colleges, and it's really with this kind of anti-racist and decolonial lens and decolonial praxis. And I think we heard from other panelists that a lot of what we're doing in community colleges is creating experiences that not only dismantle, but create these beautiful experiences where people can show up as their true selves and feel celebrated and honored and are able to learn and grow and be vulnerable. And that really is kind of at the core of what I strive to do in my roles in education, and the work that I've done in this program and kind of deepening my understanding of what that looks like. At times has felt very overwhelming. I know in one class where we were learning about ways that kind of globally people are working to decolonize education, and I felt very overwhelmed, like this is just not possible. How can we do this within these institutions that were built to perpetuate colonial logics? And learning about kind of decolonial praxis and how we kind of take action through that critical praxis is something that I found very hopeful. So I'm doing this while staying connected to my colleagues, to my community, to my heart, to my family, to the people that I love. Staying critically hopeful, because sometimes it can be hard to stay hopeful. I think sometimes it is easy to feel very overwhelmed by all that we have going on in the world. And I try to stay curious always about what's going on and how people are approaching the work, and not kind of approach the work in a way that I necessarily feel like I know what I'm doing at all times, but I'm staying curious about what we're all learning and building together. Oops. And so this is a quote from MLK, and I just think this is also part of what really drives my work, is really thinking about that it's always the right time to do the right thing. And what is not showing there for some reason that I can't see is that at the core of my work is really relationships with people in my community, partnerships that I build to do the work, and the community. I think everything that I've experienced working in community college has been done with a community of people. So as I started as the inaugural hire of the multicultural retention tutor team at City College of San Francisco, and in that role, we were asked to build a team of embedded tutors in English classes. And a lot of that role, the tutors didn't have a seat at the table in the department. They didn't necessarily even have a place to do our work. So a lot of what we did was create those spaces and create practices that allowed the tutors who are working most closely with students and really building relationships to kind of build those relationships and bridge those with the classroom. And so even though that was kind of an early position, I think there was really this opportunity to change systems and practices within the department that I was working in. And then I started working as a adjunct faculty at Laney College. Laney College is in Oakland. And the first class that I was assigned, I was told, I taught English, and the first class I was assigned, they said, so this is a class that's part of this learning community, and we need you to contextualize it with biotechnology and construction. And I was like, okay, those are like wildly different career fields, but I'll do what I can. And, you know, so I had about 15 students, and it was messy, to be really honest. It was messy. I had a 2-year-old as a single parent who often was in tow secretly, because that wasn't necessarily something you could do. But, you know, it was messy, but I learned a lot, and I kind of fell in love with community college at that point, because the students that I had in that classroom were students who were recruited from parole offices, from Veterans Affairs, students who had been previously homeless or drug addicted, students who were unemployed, and students who were coming out of the foster care system. And the community that was formed, even though at the beginning they were all on the furthest corners of the room that they could be because nobody knew each other, the community that formed was amazing. And I went on to stay in that program, coordinating the program and changing it from that mesh of biotech and construction to a program of 8 cohorts with 7 different career tracks. And they were learning communities with English counseling, built off of the Umoja and Puente model, but English counseling and the career technical field. And it was just, I found it to be this amazing higher education experience teaching in that program. I taught a machine technology contextualized English class, and the students would do their writing, and then I would go into the machine tech lab and try to do the thing that they were writing about, and that with them by my side, and that's how I graded. So like the hierarchies were not there, and I was learning with them, and I just loved it. So that was really kind of where I fell in love with community colleges. And then I went on to serve as tenured faculty at City College of San Francisco in the English department. And in that role, there was just all these opportunities to lead. And so the title of this presentation for me, when I was thinking about it, was Leading from Where You Stand, because I think it's really about finding, like, where can I support to create change in a positive way? It doesn't matter what your title is or what, any of those things. Really, when it gets down to doing the work, it's a matter of, like, is there a place for me? Can I do some good work here? And so I kind of, took on different roles. Some of those are listed here. And a couple of them I want to talk a little bit more about, just as an example of just kind of responding to the calls to leadership. So in 2014, there was a new equity plan in the California community colleges that was tied with funding. And so at that time, we had been required to do these equity plans, which largely ended up being shelf documents that nobody looked at. And now we had funding behind it. So when there's funding behind something, people pay attention. So, but we were at a critical time at the college. We had just gone through a really intense accreditation crisis, and we did not have anybody who was stepping up to lead the drafting of this equity plan. So I threw my name in. I'm a writer, and I was like, well, I can be of service here. And then another colleague from child development also threw their name in the hat. So together we became, because there was this kind of opportunity, we became the leads and the writers, and we did this in collaboration with the community. But out of that we designed the organization chart for the Office of Student Equity with a student equity dean and with faculty coordinators for professional development and kind of student equity generally. And that office is still funded, that they are still largely leading a lot of the professional development work at the college. And I think it came out of this really, like, grassroots and kind of dirty, kind of messy process of, like, we just need somebody to support us. And it's kind of thriving at this point. And another example of that is the guided pathways work. So we had guided pathways was something that also had funding tied to it for a number of years. And that similar, we needed a faculty to lead it, and there wasn't a lot of people standing up to do that. So I was like, well, I can do that. I can be of service here. And I really took it as a learning opportunity. I got trained in the National Equity Project's approach to liberatory design thinking. And then I formed a team, a leadership team. We all got trained. And then they led their own teams of like 7 to 12 people. So we had 6 teams of, 10 people roughly, who were all trained in liberatory design. And then we launched the Guided Pathways redesign work at the college. And it was amazing. And I hired this team of students who I worked with weekly and trained them in our systems. And they practiced with me how to have conversations in committee meetings so that they felt comfortable having a voice in the spaces that we were asking them to participate in. And they ended up leading their own student flex day, and they just really kind of changed some of the discourse that was happening at the college, to the point that the curriculum chair then started saying, we always need a student at the table, because the student was asking questions that the faculty just never would have asked. And simple things like, why don't you allow students to take that class pass, no pass? Like, what if a student was in this particular situation, right? And so, I think it was just kind of this amazing experience that really just came out of a desire to be of service and be creative. I love big, messy projects, and so that was like right up my alley. And now currently, I'm serving as a Dean of Business, Social Sciences, and Learning Resources at Las Positas College in the East Bay. And prior to that, I was the Dean of Academic Affairs at Cerritos College down in LA. Some of what I'm going to talk about is more with Cerritos, because I've only been at Las Positas for about 4 months. So in my role as an administrator, I've really kind of felt like I've, one, tried to create some balance in leading, supporting people to lead, and guiding. When I was a faculty leader, I felt like, I didn't necessarily have the title of an administrator or somebody that is perceived to have power. So in many ways, I felt like a little more free to just like, I'm gonna lead like in a way that is, I felt a little bit more free. I think at this point, I really also want to support other people to take the lead and grow and take on those big messy projects that people allowed me to do as well, because it was an amazing opportunity. But also recognizing where maybe there is a need for leadership. And there has, even in my current role, even though I've only been there 4 months, there has been times where people are asking me, we could really use your leadership here, and or where they're saying there's been a void of leadership. And so that's an opportunity to kind of take on that role, and then really kind of seeking out the partners and the allies who are also really equity driven and equity focused, and working toward change in that way. So some of the things that I have been able to do in those roles, at Cerritos College, I launched an ethnic studies task force because the way that ethnic studies was being implemented at the college was such that the courses were being cross-listed with other disciplines, and so it was preventing us from hiring ethnic studies faculty because all of the classes were being taught in poli-sci or sociology or psychology, and it was taking away the funding that the college could allocate to ethnic studies. So I launched a task force using that National Equity Project's liberatory design, and really got some dialogue going about what are we doing and what are the implications of what we're doing, and how, really kind of getting other people to get curious about what was happening. I'm gonna go through this a little bit quickly. The other kind of thing that I think was really impactful in that role was I worked with the Emoja and Puente faculty leads, and we created a year-long culturally sustaining pedagogy and practices training that then later was worked into the first year faculty training. And part of that, I developed a workshop in one of my classes in this program, was one of the workshops that kind of kicked off that program. And now I'm currently have been asked to share some of this work outside of the California community colleges, and there's actually a group of us going to Chicago in a couple of weeks, 2 of whom are IME students that I met in this program. These are some of the topics that we've presented on, but this program has presented these amazing people and opportunities, and the community colleges need these people who are thinking with this level of critical consciousness. So thank you so much for this honor.
Can we give another round of applause to our love appreciation for our panelists? And for our remaining time, I'd like to start us on some Q&A, some discussion. So if I could ask the panelists to all join me up here, and you can all think about what questions, comments, or appreciations you all have for our panelists. One of the things, I just wanted to highlight some of the things that I took notes, because I always take notes. Some of the things that I heard in common throughout each of the sharings was like the importance of finding your people for creating your team, right? So hiring good people when you can, finding the people that you want to work with, right? Who you can work with, being in those coalitions, finding the right spaces where you also feel seen, and then creating that same kind of belonging for our students. Showing up as our full selves, again, creating that, having the courage to do that, and then that giving permission to our students to do the same, and then intentionally building the spaces for students to do the same. And then so much beautiful, I think so many IME theories brought into Praxis, right? Culturally sustaining practices, decolonial practices, bringing our whole emotional selves, right? The courage to do all of that and to lead in those ways. I think is something I heard through all of these panelists. So do we have questions, comments from folks?
Just want to thank you all for providing all the information that you did. It was amazing. I learned a lot. My question is for President Manuel. I am interested in becoming an administrator one day, when I grow up. But I'm interested in how you kind of show up as your true, authentic self. And, it's one thing to create these liberatory spaces, while you're in your office or while you're in your classroom. I guess my question is more so how we create these liberatory spaces institution-wise to where, we could, draw from that and students know that they don't have to go see this program or they don't have to go to the Quinte project or Umoja to get that feeling, but more of a liberatory as a way, as an institutional practice as a whole. Does my question make sense?
Can I paraphrase that? Also for the folks on the live stream, first of all, appreciations, but the question specifically for Manuel about how do we create liberatory spaces that include specific programs but are also institutional practice. Does that sound right?
Yeah, pretty good.
So, yeah, good. Mike, just testing. Okay. Thank you for the question. I think one of the ways I challenge myself to always stay just slightly uncomfortable and curious. I think there's lots of ways. I think some of us as administrators are like the best overthinkers, and I try to use that to my advantage because it's always going to be there because it's part of my socialization as a brown male growing up in South Sac. But what I mean by that is there's many ways in which I think we're socialized to believe what's acceptable for a president to look, feel, act, and talk like. And there's lots of ways in which I think I try to deliberately make myself just a little bit uncomfortable in those framings. So I'll give you some specific examples. So I try to have office hours, which is not an uncommon thing for a president to do. You hold your office hours, but I make sure to have them multiple times a week. I make sure to have them at night. I make sure to have them when students are available. I was very, very blessed, and I invite any one of you, if you want to come to my office hours, you're more than welcome to, because it's, again, the communities. I have a beautiful office, and sometimes I think it embarrasses is too harsh of a word, but in Spanish, we do say que me da vergüenza, but not in a way to say that I am embarrassed. It's a humbling experience to have an office that nice. Some of the folks in the room know how nice my office is. So I try to make it so that I shouldn't be the only one that experiences my office. Like, everyone should come to my office, and that's something that I find that our students are taken aback by. And they say, wait, so you want to meet in your office? I'm like, yeah, come to my office. But I find that more often than not, students are nervous or hesitant around that. And they say, well, I don't know, maybe we should just meet somewhere else. I'm like, no, let's meet in my office, and let's change the way. Let's sit on the couch. Let's look at the view. I'm on the 4th floor on the top of a hill overlooking, and I can see everything from the Bay Bridge all the way down to Redwood City Shores. And it's a beautiful view. So I hold my office hours up there. My office hours have become like a very welcomed point in my week, where I will have faculty from photography, students from Puente, my Umoja students came the other day, my sustainability week planners came to talk about that, and they all sat down and talked about the impact of Trump's latest legislative actions and how that impacts each of their worlds differently. It has become literally a microcosm, an experiment in which different communities, different programs are seeing themselves represented in ways that maybe they haven't before. But the uncomfortable piece, and I'll wrap on this, is that so just this week, I was not let into an event that I was invited to as being in my role. And it was an event not on my campus, it was at another institution. And I was in a waiting room for 45 minutes to see if my name was on the list. And I share that importantly because the way I show up, I'm not gonna change the way that I look, I'm not gonna change the way that I act, that I speak. You're gonna get me in Spanish, English, and Spanglish all the time. I'm not gonna change the way that I am because I got here through my community, for my community. And I don't wanna change who I am because I have this role, because then the role has changed me. I need more people to see themselves as possibilities. I want more Black, brown, queer, multiple abilities, spiritualities. I want all of that to see themselves in this presidency. It shouldn't be that we have a prototype for a president. And if that means that I'm gonna be 45 minutes in a waiting room and challenging that reason why socially I know perhaps what may have been going on and why I was being placed in a waiting room when I was invited as the president of the college. But I also have to translate that quickly because we have to be hella angry and smart all the time.
Thank you.
My question's for all of you. Thank you so much. I'm very curious through all of your perspectives and every role that you've had. I work at a community college. I work at Sierra College in Rockland. Also, Southside born and raised, so I love hearing
Yeah.
and I think one of the questions I've had for a while now is how to get our exec team and how to get our exec team and more institutionalized recognition of these political events, whether it's in the US or globally. There isn't any acknowledgement, and to me that's lack of acknowledgement to the staff and the students who are all simultaneously processing, still showing up to an institution that is almost like hands-on about it.
Again, can I paraphrase
Yeah,
this
yeah.
from our experience? And also so that we're sure we understand. I think the question is, how do we get our institutions to respond to what is actually happening right now in our world?
Respond is even like a big ask.
Oh, okay, that's too much.
Just
Okay.
acknowledge, like an email,
Right,
like,
okay.
holding spaces where it's, the exec team or someone in leadership that is doing that work versus like, I can do that work in the employee resource groups that I bring, but like that's different. That's very self-made versus having it institutionalized.
So how do we get the leadership of these institutions to acknowledge, respond to this moment that we are in? And also with the understanding that there's so many folks always and already doing the work, like how do we get our administrative teams to acknowledge that on all of those levels?
Is this working? So thank you for the question and then also sharing your experience at one of the colleges. From my perspective at the system level, I think I'm surprised by this because part of my role as the Deputy Chancellor, working alongside with my Chancellor, is that every day I am in meetings and responding to college leadership on these various federal attacks that are happening and then the legislative changes. So I'm in a lot of listening sessions with executive leadership and then also specific to our chief executive officers because they will text message us, they'll email asking for advice and consultation in terms of responses at the college level. So, but to your point, we're a very big system, 116 colleges, so it's uneven. And then we also have, I think, leadership who are also grappling with how to respond. And if communication is already something that needs to be worked on institutionally, because it usually is, then I think it makes it harder. But I really love that you asked that question because how it translates for me in my leadership role is that I will continue to work with executive leadership and ask, how are you communicating? Because we're communicating from our level as a system and trying to provide as much information as possible, trying to create system-wide spaces for listening and sharing strategies with our undocu students, with our LGBTQ students, with all of our different communities. And so, but sometimes, because the system is so large, we don't really know what's happening on the ground. So it's an action item for me. So thanks for bringing it up.
And then I'll just quickly say that as someone who's also experienced that as well, I think a good method, as well as maybe talking to whoever your direct administrator is, and maybe just asking them, is there like a safe way in which that you can get the word out with the group of students that you work with? Because I can think of a couple of different situations where maybe the institution, whether it be the president's office, didn't get out a message about a situation that we felt was important to our community, and we wanted people to speak out about it. So maybe even that means writing up something with the students who are expressing concern, or you're writing something yourself, and not just putting it out there, because then that can seem like, insubordination, but I would bring it up to my administrators and say, hey, this is what we would like to speak on. Could you maybe filter this message so that we can get it out? Would you be okay with me sending it out? So then they're not only is just buy-in with yourself, but with the students, and it lets the administrators know that this is an important matter to get out, because sometimes they will kick it back and be like, hey, maybe this isn't how I would want to put the message out, but it puts it on their mind that they need to do something about it. So always, in my opinion, administrators, always put them in a position to have to confront an issue, because sometimes they're just not aware. And I mean, I always try to give people grace and say that they have a lot of stuff that they're dealing with. I mean, with all the stuff that's going on in the world, it's kind of hard to not see everything that's happening, but it's sometimes easy to have certain things get slipped through the cracks. So I think if you're working intentionally within any space, any community, if it's important to you, make it important to them, and just let them know, hey, this is a matter. And when your students are telling you, it comes nothing better than from a student to tell their administrators, because it's their administrators as well, that this is an important matter and I really want to talk about it more.
Thank you for the question. One thing that comes to mind for me, and just kind of adding on to what everybody shared, is I think I have experienced in this current moment anyway, that there are reasons to not make a public announcement of support. So for example, with supporting undocumented students, right now, in some ways, it can be better to do the work of supporting undocumented students and undocumented staff at the college while not making a public proclamation that you're doing it, because in some ways, as we've seen going on nationally, that can kind of put you in a position of, being attacked in various ways. So I think that we can kind of look back historically, like civil rights movement and some of the work there was a lot of work going on that was not being publicly broadcast, but was organizing and was coalition building and was supporting the community. And so I would also wonder and be curious about if the work is going on and it's just not being publicly announced, but that there are still kind of coalitions building around supporting particularly the populations that are more vulnerable at this particular moment than other times. But I also hear and have felt your sentiment as well, and I know even as an administrator, just this semester we had an event where the chancellor made a comment about that the district was reifying their commitment to DEIA and kind of talked a lot about that. And it kind of like, as a new administrator in the system, I just kind of breathed a sigh of relief hearing that at that level. So there is, a time and a place where that needs to happen so that all the people in the institution know that, it's safe for me to kind of publicly acknowledge that as well.
I'll just super fast. I'll just say super fast that there's a difference between, there's three types of responses in my opinion. There's silence, there's saying what we are going to do that's different, and then there's reeling back your processes and changing them. So preemptive compliance, in my opinion, is not a strategy. And so that's something that I'm happy that in our district and in our college specifically, we are not partaking in. So moving forward and saying, I know what's going to happen, so this is what we're going to do, we're not doing that either, because I think that is also a way to keep our community safe. The one that I struggle with, and this is again going back to my earlier response, with the humanity of the position, is sitting in cabinet level conversations where we're talking about policies to dig deeper in what we already do for undocumented students, as an example, and speaking of the community as if they aren't in the room, not even intentionally, with the best of intentions, but having conversations around how to protect our communities, when I can't help but think of my dad and my mom and my brothers and my tios and my tias in LA. And there was one meeting where I did reach out to a homie of mine in the system and say, I lost it in that meeting, and I did rage cry. And that ugly rage cry where you can't help but your voice cracking, and this is with other vice chancellors and other presidents and my chancellor in the room. And I know that in that moment I lost a little bit of political capital there, not because I think that crying in front of my colleagues is weak or a vulnerability, but I know that not everybody in that room understands where I'm coming from, so they'll perceive of that differently. Do I regret doing that? No. This is unprecedented, and I can't help but think of my father being taken away when we're talking about these policies and protocols. So the very least we can do for our community is reify what we are already about and what we will commit to doing for our communities. There's nothing that we lose by reaffirming to what Michelle said, what we're here and what we're doing. And we have not scrubbed our websites, and I take for granted that the community really appreciates hearing that. We are not changing our websites. We are not removing equity, anti-racism, all of these important words that may seem performative, but at the very least represent something. Don't change them. The moment we change them, we lose legal standing upon which we could potentially make arguments to say, this is supported by law. But the moment we start to reel those back, we start to make our potential arguments weaker.
Questions on the panel, but we do have 15 minutes before the next plenary, which will be, is it in here, Monisha?
Yes.
Okay, there's 15 minutes between now and the next session. So we will wrap this session with the invitation to keep engaging with us during that break time. I want to thank the panelists for being here. I want to thank you all also for the reminder, and this I think is especially true for folks who want to join the community college system or any system. But I think one of the things that's so beautiful about everyone up here is that you got your positions not from hiding who you are, not in spite of who you are, but exactly because of what you bring, right? All of the things that you bring. Manuel is a good friend, and when I heard that you got that position, it made me think really well of San Antonio, the college of CSM too. Because I was like, oh, because I know Manuel came in there and he was himself, like fully himself, and they hired him because you are you, right? And that made me feel like, oh, that's a system that like is prioritizing the right things, right? So like all the things that tell us that like, well, we have to be strategic in these ways about who we are and what we bring. I feel like this is an invitation to be courageous about who you are and to call on all of us, all of you who had your hands raised about wanting to be in the community college system or who are already in the community college system, to find each other, right? These relationships are so much a part of that coalition building. It's part of how we get permission to be ourselves and let other people have that permission to be ourselves. And there is power in community, and I feel like it's the only way forward, especially in these hard times. So thank you all for being here.